Hello, listeners. It's AZ with the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. You are listening to episode 135. And today I sat down and talked to my friend Jenna Weinstein, who is finishing her doctorate in public health at Georgia Southern University. And she also works with the U.S. Army as an instructor and trainer. Jenna is a mental performance coach and a super, super kind and interesting individual. You are going to love the episode. As always, please leave us a rating, leave us a review, and share the podcast. Have a great day. Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive.
Got like a little tickle or something now?
I don't know. It's like, allergy season in Oklahoma. Welcome to pollen.
Yeah.
It's crazy. How are you, my friend?
I'm actually doing pretty well. Yeah. Like, not even all things considered. I'm doing pretty well. I feel like other people, but things are going great for me. Like, work's fine. Work is good, but I'm in the final stages of my dissertation. So I should be defending in February, which is really exciting. And then officially graduating in May. So then that's just really great. So I'm just like, and then it's a major accomplishment, like checked off my list. And then I find myself, now that I'm closing in on almost finishing my dissertation and PhD, I'm like, okay, well, once that's done, then what should I do? Because this has been like, it's like, I feel like I need to fill that space with something rather than just enjoy the free time that I'll probably have. I'm like, well, now I should probably do something else, right? That's the point. And now I'm just like, well, what do I want to do next? Because I don't really know what else I want to do.
That's incredible. And I can so relate. Like
the pressure of needing to set a new goal or something like that is like niggling at my mind. I'm like, I need to do something else, right? Because I just can't do one thing.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think so either. Do you think we should introduce you to the listeners?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, we probably should.
Listeners, it's AZ with the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast, and I'm on today with my friend Jenna Weinstein. Jenna, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Jenna's doing great. Jenna's doing great. We have been friends for a number of years, and meeting at the ISSN conference in the hallway, like.
Yes.
But I remembered, this is the second time we're recording, guys. We had some technical difficulties, and I was able to pull it out of my rear end last time, what year it was, because I was presenting and I was having a wardrobe malfunction as well. But now I can't remember. 2021, maybe. I'm not sure.
I think it was like right after the pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah. It was like, because it wasn't a lot of people that went that year.
Yes. And poor Katie Dabrowski had to like bite the bullet and help me with my wardrobe malfunction. It was fantastic. It was fantastic. Well, do you think we should go ahead and ask the three like burning questions? Are you ready for those?
Yeah, because I don't remember what they were from the last time we recorded either. So
I know. Okay, first one's easy. Who is Jenna Weinstein?
So Jenna Weinstein, you can just call me Jenna. So that I think that's probably the first part is I like to think of myself as pretty like approachable, casual, but I work in the health and wellness field. I work full time for the U.S. Army as a mental performance coach, while also I'm in the last semester-ish of my Ph.D. in public health. So that's really exciting. And when I'm not doing those things, I just enjoy spending time with my husband. We live in Savannah, Georgia. I'm originally from New York City. We have 3 dogs that are all really cool. I like to do creative writing on the side. And when I'm not doing other activities, like I like to work out. I'm a former self-proclaimed meathead. And then
self-proclaimed, she's jacked.
And then I'll binge the occasional Netflix show when I have free time.
Okay, side question. Did you watch the Sprint series on Netflix?
I don't think so.
Oh,
No.
super interesting. Okay, so there was like a 4-episode series before the Olympics, all the hype coming up to the Olympics, and then a 4-episode series after. And it was all about like the 100, 200, 400 sprinters.
Oh,
And wow, there are some of those people that are just so ego driven. It was crazy.
phenomenal athletes though. Like,
So phenomenal. So
love it.
phenomenal. All right. So what sets your soul on fire? And it can be in a good way or a bad way.
Ooh. Okay. I think my husband would argue and say that I'm not like an easy person to like please or excite, but I consider myself pretty easygoing relatively. So I think like what sets my soul on fire in a good way is I just like to be able to have fun, and relax and be goofy doing things. I do take the things that are really important to me seriously. And I think you have to be able to enjoy the things you do as well. So if the things you're doing don't give you any allowance for fun or enjoyment, I have a hard time fully investing my attention into it. So as long as I get some type of enjoyment out of something, whether it's being around other people, being creative in some way, shape, or form, or being able to like make jokes or like have a little fun along the way. That's what sets my soul on fire. Just not having to take life too seriously, because there's always going to be a time and a place to be serious. But if you can laugh at yourself or laugh at a situation, I think that's the best part of things at times.
So what's setting my soul on fire right now is that giant dry erase board behind you.
Oh, yeah.
That is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is my home office. I have a giant like whiteboard in my office and a small one off to the side as well, which came in very handy for school when I was mapping out my dissertation and other research projects. I'm very much like a concept mapper and just like brainstormer. So I just free write a lot of ideas behind me. And also during COVID and the pandemic, if I was doing like presentations or anything from home, it was a great way to just like give viewers like a visual to look at.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm also a dry erase board girl, but I tend to go for the glass ones, the clear glass ones. And this is just a hilarious story. A handyman came and installed them for me. And I thought it would be like self-explanatory that they would be, what would that be? Landscape orientation.
Yes.
But he installed both of them in portrait orientation.
You're tall. So
yeah.
How tall they go, but you're taller.
Yeah. I was very entertained by that. Okay. And also, Jenna, I'm just all over the place today. You said just call me Jenna. That's also your Instagram handle, isn't it?
It is. It is. So really funny side story to how I came up with that. When I started working my current job with the Army, I was at Fort Bliss, Texas, and we were running a 2-week resilience mental toughness course. And it was my first time as a training team member on the course. And I'm naturally like a pretty like awkward person. I'm an introvert who likes to extrovert. So I like to be around people, but I'm always a little socially awkward. And everybody on the training team was going around introducing themselves, and they all had like longer names that they shortened. So it's like there was like, hey, like I'm Catherine, but you can call me Katie, or I'm like so and so. I'm like I'm Brian, but you can call me Bri. And I was like, and so I followed the same pattern of speech that they did, not thinking about it. And I was like, I'm Jenna. You can just call me Jenna. And somehow it got like so many laughs, and I was like, I wasn't even trying to be funny. I just panicked. And I just kept doing that. And then when like Instagram came out, I was like, I don't really know what to call myself. So I was like, just call me Jenna. So
incredible. And I would never have guessed that you're socially awkward. I am very socially awkward. Yeah. So, well, maybe that's why we're friends. Okay. Like finds like, all right, Jenna, how are you changing the world?
Oh gosh. I don't know if I'm changing the world, because that's a lot of change. I'd like to think that I'm changing myself like a little bit, because I feel like that's where I have the most control. I think it can be really frustrating when we set goals for ourselves. Like we want to make a global impact, and it doesn't happen because it's really hard to measure global impact when you're one person, even if you have a pretty decent amount of reach. But you can impact yourself really well. And I like to think that I'm doing a good job of that on a consistent basis with like taking care of myself health wise. I'm impacting myself. I'm nurturing relationships that are really important to me. I'm trying to put time and energy into things that set my soul on fire, as you like to say. And then trying to like always interact and meet like new people or like-minded people. So I think that is, I don't know if I'm answering the question properly, but that's how I feel like I'm changing the world, is just by like growing and involving myself and maybe meeting new people along the way that share similar interests with me.
That's such a good answer. I
I
love it.
should go for Miss America.
You should. Oh my
I don't
God.
think I
Okay.
meet the height requirement. I feel like there's a height requirement.
You are a tiny little thing. Are you what, 5'1"?
Oh, I'm 5 feet on a tall day.
5 feet on a tall day.
On a tall
Dang,
day.
girl.
I can make it onto the rides at amusement parks, but I feel like barely. Like I shouldn't wear flip-flops. Like I gotta wear like sneakers just to make sure.
Oh my gosh. All right. I'm going to ask you, first of all, tell me what a mental performance coach does.
Sure. Yeah. I think generally, so my master's degree is in sport and performance psychology. So I think the field of sport psychology has gained a lot more momentum and interest. And now that you hear more professional athletes talking about it, it was huge in discussions during the Olympics this summer when we had like athletes like Simone Biles take like a mental health break and then come back and perform phenomenally. Or like the male gymnast who is really vocal about visualization. You hear about it when athletes are coming back from injuries. So I think when people hear that like I'm a mental performance coach or I have a background in sports psychology, they tend to think, oh, you must work with like elite level athletes. And I do. I consider military and first responders like they're tactical athletes and they are elite because they're highly specialized. So I work with soldiers, helping them like improve their mental toughness, focus better under pressure, make decisions when they're under pressure, go into unknown or novel situations with more confidence, maintaining motivation for short-term and long-term tasks. And then that feeds into team dynamics, leadership dynamics. So a lot of those things that fall under the umbrella of performance.
This may shock you, but the fire service is way behind the military. So I feel like the military is sort of as cutting edge as you can get. Fire service is 20 years behind, and law enforcement, I think, is bringing up the tail a little bit. But due to our culture, I hear a lot of just, he or she just needs to toughen up. They're just not mentally strong. They need to toughen up. Well, not helpful. Can you riff on that a little bit, though?
Yeah. So I think when people make comments like that, whether they're sports coaches, business executives, or if they're in like the first responder or tactical fields and they're saying like, hey, these individuals need to be tougher, I think their brains and their minds and their hearts are in the right place, but the execution of what they're saying is unclear. Because I mean, it's like I think the easiest way to equate it is like if you're like a physical trainer and you're working with a client and you're like, oh, well, just be fitter, like just be just get in better shape. But not everybody needs the same fitness routine or the same fitness program, and not everybody responds to the same stimuli in the same way. And like anybody who's been in like the personal training or strength coaching field for, I'd say, a year, you learn very quickly like the techniques you use for one athlete does not work for another. And so when I hear anybody in like a leadership role saying like, oh, my folks just need to be more mentally tough. I'm like, sure. I don't disagree. I feel like everybody, even high performers, can be more mentally tough. But what does that mean to you? Like, what qualities of mental toughness do you think that they are not performing well in? Because what I might consider a person as not being mentally tough might be different from their perception. So if we just go in saying like, oh yeah, you're not mentally tough, and to assume somebody's lacking in certain areas, we might be making assumptions about what they need and be completely off the map. So usually when I work with any group, if they make some type of comment like that, we usually have to slow down and define what areas make up mental toughness first, in their opinion, and then think about ways to approach those areas and what strategies might work best.
So I'm going to a goal here, but I want to first, shall we brainstorm together? Because you said what makes up mental toughness, and I'm writing this down. I'm going to take notes so that I don't forget.
Yeah,
but
me too.
Okay, so in your opinion, give me a couple things that people have told you before that are characteristics of mental toughness. I think like not giving up. Is that a typical one?
Yep.
Okay.
So I hear that a lot. Like that'll either be phrased as like not giving up, like the ability, like the stick to itiveness. Perseverance is usually lumped into there.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's an excellent quality for mental toughness. And then then the question is, well, how do you teach somebody to just not give up? And
yes.
So I think that's also where you have to think about like, okay, so when people give up, are they giving up? You mean they're giving up mentally, like they're just losing that drive to stick with something. And then when I think of that, it's, well, do they want it anymore? Because sometimes people give up because they don't want something anymore. It's not important to them. And it's really hard to make somebody want something, to make somebody keep going for something that they don't want. So then you might have to talk with them and figure out where was the motivation or the desire for that goal or that achievement lost along the way. Or if they still want it, but maybe they're just hitting like a rough patch and they don't know how to navigate it, that's a completely different conversation. They still really want it, and they might be frustrated that they don't know how to overcome certain obstacles. And so those are completely different conversations that need to be had with individuals.
That makes total sense. Okay, so not giving up, stick to itiveness, perseverance. We're lumping those kind of together. Yeah. What's one that you hear a lot?
So I hear like it gets lumped up into like confidence, self-talk, but like believing in oneself type thing.
Like self-efficacy almost?
Yeah. So, and that's where I always will break it down for a group. If they're like, confidence in yourself, I'm like, absolutely. But are you talking about like self-esteem or self-efficacy? Because you could have self-efficacy without having so much self-esteem and vice versa. And then most people don't necessarily know the difference between self-efficacy and self-esteem. So like self-esteem is your own self-worth, believing that you like are valuable and that you like yourself. And then self-efficacy is your belief in your abilities to accomplish something. So I might like myself, but my self-efficacy towards like running a marathon right now is like not great. So yeah, my confidence in doing that task might not be great, but I might have the skills to get me there in time. And so helping people tease apart, like, are they low in confidence in themselves, or are they just low in confidence in their skill set? Again, two different things that we can definitely train a person in, that we can coach a person up in, but two completely different needs.
I love this. And I'm already on a tangent. So I don't want to dig too much further into this, what makes up mental performance, because I have two big topics to tease out here. The first one regarding fitness. Yeah. I see this so many times where, say, in an academy setting or a new firefighter, they get tired, they stop, whatever. And then there's always the correlation. Well, they're not mentally strong enough. So now let's go punish them with some fitness to make them mentally strong enough. Can you tear this apart?
Yeah. So I'm sympathetic to this because I know if somebody is struggling physically, telling them to do more physically probably doesn't help them because they're clearly struggling. But as somebody who really enjoys physical punishment in terms of like, hey, when I played rugby in college, I almost enjoyed when we had to do sprints as penalties. Like I was that athlete that I didn't mind it very much. So I was like, we're still getting better. So I understand the intent behind it because I almost enjoyed having to do like those extra bits of physical torment because I knew it would pay off in the end. But if you have somebody who is physically struggling to meet standards, and they have been physically struggling to meet standards, telling them to do more is only going to shame them further. I know Hollywood does a really good job of glamorizing the idea of like physical punishment in the means of fitness, like fitness-based punishment. I should refine that phrase.
Yeah, that's true.
Fitness-based punishment, because like you'll see like a movie of an athlete who's like not making the cut, and they're like, "Go up and run the bleachers," and then like you see this montage of the athlete like running bleachers, and then suddenly like sprinting ahead of the team in the next scene, and they're like, "See, you just had to run more bleachers, and you did it." And it creates like this false expectation that like, oh, if they do more of the things that they're horrible at, they'll get better. And theoretically, that's right. The more you do of something, the better you will get. And I think it's a delicate balance that if somebody, like in an academy setting, obviously the standards are very clear of what people have to do to be successful and to pass. So if you're not meeting those standards, does that mean you showed up to the academy underprepared? Or are you prepared and maybe you're just like choking under the pressure and you're buckling under the pressure, and the cadre know you're capable and they're just trying to push you to unlock that part of your brain that's telling you you can't. And so without talking to the person and without observing where the person is physically, it would be hard to know. But I think that's a delicate line you have to walk, that using like fitness-based punishment as a way to like shame somebody or punish someone, only so many people will respond to it in an effective way. Some people will shut down completely if you overuse that form of method of motivation. I'm not saying it's bad because it works for some people, but others, they're going to shut down because a shame-based motivator is negative in nature. Because it's using very negative and strongly held emotions for people. So if a person doesn't respond well to shame, they're either going to shut down or they're going to shut you out. So they're going to lose respect for you. So you have to be really careful with how you utilize it.
I could not have scripted this, girl, because the next question is this. I have known more than one firefighter that did okay in academy. They did just fine. They get to their firehouse, they get hired on their first job, they're doing okay, and then someone starts to nitpick at them, and then all of a sudden they're not even able to do the skills that they could do decently well in the academy. So their performance is just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And then they get the conversation like, maybe this isn't the job for you. Where could we write that a little bit? Because that seems like that's upsetting the apple cart too much.
I think so. I think I definitely would want to ask you, like in the fire service especially, will you be in situations where if you're doing something wrong, people are going to have to check you in the moment?
Yes. Okay. Yes. And it seems almost that it gets to be, I've seen it happen so many times. Someone gets run off from a department because they're not competent and they're not capable, and this isn't the job for them. And then they go to another department with a different set of personalities and they thrive.
Yeah.
So it's like that choking thing that you were talking about. And so I guess I could ask you from both perspectives. From the cadre's perspective, how do you sort of check yourself and see, like, am I making this person worse? And then from the person's perspective, how do you recover from that?
Yeah. Well, And I think you just said it really well, is like some people might thrive in certain environments with certain cadre and certain teams, and then they might squander in others. So, I mean, so this is a parallel. This is my first year playing fantasy football. And I enjoy football. I don't follow it because there's so many teams and there's so many athletes, but I'm finally following it for the first time this year, or I'm trying to. And one of the athletes on my roster is Saquon Barkley. And he's a phenomenal player, but I've learned he was before the season, he was with a different team. Great. He's a phenomenal athlete. But the team he was with prior, he did not flourish the way he should have. And now he's with a new team this season and he's kicking ass. And it's like, so what changed? He's the same athlete he was, but now he's in a different environment with different coaches, different players, and it's helping him bring out his best. So I think there could be two things to address here. If somebody's like, oh, you're not going to make it in this career. Maybe. And I think like that's where you have to trust the expertise of a cadre member. If they've worked at the academy for a long time and they just have seen enough people come through, can they really tell based on a person's performance, their attitude, the way they carry themselves and take feedback? Can they tell if there's something about their the way they're going through the academy that they can assess? Yeah, that person's probably really going to struggle in a career with the fire service. Like they might make it through the academy, but they're probably going to struggle in certain aspects, and that's okay. Or is it like, hey, like maybe your standards as a cadre member might be exceptionally high, and people are meeting the schoolhouse and the academy standards, but maybe not your personal standards, and you're having a hard time of compartmentalizing the two. And again, neither one is a bad thing, but it's being able to distinguish like what you're doing there.
You just tied together a thought from a previous guest. Fernando Montes said, the cadre should not be the gatekeepers. Mm-hmm. Let the standards be the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you just said. Oh,
yeah.
Brilliant.
Well, I mean, you hear about that a lot. Again, like working with the military, I definitely hear about that a lot at different like military schoolhouses where the cadre, like they can be labeled as like badge protectors. That's a lingo they use in certain schoolhouses where they might say the cadre are selecting only certain people to get through rather than relying on the standards. And maybe I don't know. I don't work at the schoolhouses. I don't know, but yeah, very much so. It's like if these are the standards, if they're meeting the standards, then you can't kick them out if they're meeting the standards. And if you're unhappy with the standard, then write a new policy to change the standard and increase it.
Do you think that, I'm probably going to answer my own question, but I want to hear the experts say it. Mm-hmm. Do you think that sometimes it's just a personality conflict?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes we just don't like people. I think absolutely. I mean, I think even in like professional settings, like even if you don't consider yourself an athlete in any way, shape, or form, but you have a job where you interact with people, you might have people in your office where you're like, I really don't like you, even though like you're doing the job well enough, like you're doing all the things you're supposed to be doing, but I still don't like you. And because I have like a personality difference with an individual, I'm going to look for every small thing to justify why I shouldn't like them. And that might include like, hey, like they don't like file their reports the right way. I'm like, do they file the reports not the right way, or just not the way that you would do it, but it's still right? And they're like, okay, yeah, that. And I'm like, all right, well then you're like nitpicking. And I think sometimes our personal opinions can definitely cloud our judgment, which is normal. I think that's something that makes it so hard to be a cadre member or an evaluator, because you have to be objective in a subjective role. Like you're a human evaluating other people. And even if you have rubrics and standards, you're still interacting with people. So it's not like you're not talking with them and seeing them conduct themselves. So there's always going to be like subconscious inferences and assessments you're making that are going to influence your opinion of them. And it's really hard to turn that part of your brain off. So
You are so smart, my friend. I
I
love
don't
that.
know. I wouldn't say I'm smart at all. I just think I've been in the role of like evaluator and cadre member, and I've received feedback as an evaluator of like having been like a harsh grader and or being like slightly unfair in my critiques. And I think that's one of the hardest things you can hear as an instructor and evaluator, because you're just trying to ensure the standard. You're just trying to help and ensure that that great people take the positions that you want them to take. And if you go easy on people in the evaluations, then that could mean like a detriment for the program or the future of whatever service you're trying to promote. And but you don't want to be the one who's like, oh, this one's the harsh grader. You don't want to be with them. Nobody likes them. But you don't want to be too friendly, because then it's like, well, you're not really upholding the standard that you should be. So it's like I think it's a really hard role to be an evaluator, and a mentor in a schoolhouse environment, because you're constantly trying to juggle being like a caring and compassionate person to an extent, because you do have to show that you care about their success while also upholding standards. It's a very delicate balance, such a delicate balance.
And definitely not easy.
No.
I guess I hadn't thought about it from that perspective before.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're just doing their job. Usually.
Yeah, they are. Well, and then at the same time, depending, like everybody else who you're evaluating, they're coming in and then they're meeting you and they're doing the same thing. They're making their own personal judgments and assessments off you. And then you have to be able to back up all the feedback you're giving them. So as a member of a schoolhouse or a cadre team, you have to show that you have the credibility to judge them under the standards that you're setting for them. So then there's all this pressure to ensure that you could do all the things that you're asking them or telling them to do too. So
100%.
Yeah, that's hard too. A lot of pressure being in the evaluator cadre role. Never going to make everybody happy.
I have so many more things to talk to you about.
Okay.
First of all, when we were at Georgia Southern and you were presenting, you did like an outdoor relay with some of the firefighters where they were doing physically like difficult tasks, getting their heart rates up, exerting themselves, and then they would come back to you and you were having them search for a number, if I remember correctly. So I want you to kind of dig into what were you trying to train them or demonstrate with that activity?
Yeah. So I think if you've worked in like a high stress job, or if you've played any sport, I think people learn very quickly once your stress levels go up or once you're physically taxed to a certain extent, making decisions and focusing becomes much more difficult. And I've been learning that, especially if you're a first responder, heart rate is going to go up very quickly. You're going to be physically strained, but you still have to be able to make very like delicate decisions and fast acting decisions and assess a scene very quickly. And sometimes you don't always have the opportunity to like take a breath and do that. So we were trying to simulate this idea of like getting your heart rate up a little bit and doing a very cognitive demanding task of like searching for numbers on a scrambled number grid. And it's not a perfect duplicate to being at a fire and having to like figure out like where your point of entry is, like who's going in, like where you're gonna set up and stage. But it's just to simulate this idea of, do you have enough time to maybe take 2 breaths and just focus on like the one thing you need to focus on? So that's all we were trying to simulate, is this idea of like assessing what you need to do, maybe taking like 1 or 2 breaths and then going with what you need to do.
So, and the idea of the 1 or 2 breaths is sort of to kick in that parasympathetic nervous system, get out of the fight or flight. Okay.
Yeah, or just lower your fight or flight response enough, because you're not going to get rid of fight or flight completely, nor should you when you're in that type of environment, but you want to just lower it enough so that you can maintain like cognitive control.
Cool.
Yeah.
which leads me to my question.
Mm-hmm.
Very few fire departments have mental performance coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them have mental health professionals, but very few have performance coaches. And so I'm a firefighter and I just want to do better for myself. Are there any sort of resources that I could look up or buy or subscribe to?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I'm a huge advocate for mental health support for anybody. I think finding the right tools and resources that work for you different for every person. I think some people respond really well to like one-on-one talking with a counselor. And I think the difficult part of having like a mental health professional in a firehouse or in a police station is if they're one person for the entire department. Um, that's a lot of bandwidth. That's a lot of people for one person to manage. And if they're the only one, what if you don't connect with them? So that's a barrier that a lot of people experience when trying to find the right mental health counselor is or professional is they go one time to a therapy session or a counseling session. They don't have a good connection with the person they met. And then they chalk it up to being like, oh yeah, therapy isn't for me. Counseling isn't for me because I didn't like that person. Like, yeah, you didn't like that person. That's why there's more than one type of counselor or therapist or resource. So I think you definitely, it's like finding the right pair of shoes. Like you got to try on a few to figure out like what you like. You might have to meet with a few different people to find the right connection that works for you. Maybe you don't enjoy person to person. Maybe virtual mental health is better for you. Some people just want to do like their own self-help, their own self-growth. So I think there are a lot of really good books out there, depending on what your needs are. So since I'm not a counselor, I don't necessarily, I don't know if it's necessarily in my scope to say which books are great for like personal counseling or anything like that. But for mental toughness, I think there are some really great books to help people just learn a little bit more about sports psychology and how to like understand like the dynamics of performing under pressure. So Grit by Angela Duckworth is a really great introductory book on like overcoming like difficult situations and why some people might have a natural level of like grit or mental toughness over others. Really easy read. Um, like, um, like anything by Goggins. I think a lot of people in like the tactical and first responder world seem to like a lot of the books he writes because it's from his perspective. It's relatable. He's somebody who has gone through it, so it's not like a scientific researcher giving their like their anecdotal perspective. He's firsthand been in it. I'm looking at my bookshelf. Honestly, I'm like, what else do I have on my bookshelf that would be good? Another good book that I have on my bookshelf is this book called Chasing Excellence by Ben Bergeron. And it's about a CrossFit athlete. So I have to take it with, he's a CrossFit coach writing this book about his CrossFit athlete, Katrin Davidsdottir, who had a huge setback in her CrossFit career. She got with him. They worked together for an entire year. And then she had this awesome comeback in CrossFit. And so it was all about like the strategies and techniques that they worked on together, not just for her physical fitness, but her mental toughness to just really help her dial in her game and be like the best competitor she could be among the field. So there's some really cool things to pull out from that book too. So those are just a couple, definitely not, I mean, I can give an exhaustive list, but I don't have an exhaustive. I won't do that. So those are 3 different books. So,
well, I'm definitely going to put those in the show notes. And I have been meaning to read Grit and I haven't read it. So
it's a good one. And Angela, and if you're not a fan of reading, like, because I think some people want the information, but they don't ingest it well through like reading the text. Angela Duckworth has done like TED Talks. You could find her like talking about her book on YouTube interviews and everything. So there's definitely other ways to access the information without having to read the books.
That I'm firefighter friendly.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of like if there's a book that you want to read, but you're like, oh, I'm just like I try to read the book, but I just can't sit down and focus and read it. You could try Audible. But I think sometimes it's just, can you just give me like, what's the bottom line up front? And I think finding authors of these books have TED Talks where they summarize their books in 15 minutes in a really interactive talk. I usually do that before I decide if I want to read the book too.
That's a good tip. I
Yeah.
go straight for the book and then realize I don't want to read the book.
Yeah. So I usually read the talk so that I read the talk. I listen to the talk first to hear a little bit more about like their research and what they did. And like, oh yeah, I definitely want to read this in a little bit more detail. And if you don't, you get a pretty good gist of it just from the TED Talk.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
I want to dig a little bit into burnout. I know your study is in teachers
Yes.
as opposed to first responders, but I would imagine, what would we call it? The principles of burnout would be the same. So, and people say like, oh, I'm so burned out, but I'm not quite sure they know exactly what they're saying. So let's talk about burnout.
Let's talk about burnout. I'll never burn out talking about burnout.
Absolutely not.
Never.
So I think in first responders, at least, there's a few factors that are sort of playing in the soup, swimming in the pond, whatever you want to call it. I think that sleep deprivation has a lot to do with it. I think that the fact that we're not making decisions on whether to spend, whether to put the 150 in the losses or profits column. We're not accountants. It's a high stress job. I'm sure that has a lot to do with it, but I also feel like there's, to some extent, some administrative betrayal that happens. And I think there's just a whole bunch of pieces to it. So let's talk about burnout in teachers, and then I'll see if I can pull out some information about firefighters.
Yeah. So, I think you're right. Like what drew my interest to burnout in general was it's a term we use a lot in any profession where we're like, oh man, I'm super burnt out this week, or I'm just super burnt out. And I think some people are accurate when they're saying they're burnt out, and other people, you might just be having a really rough week and it feels like you're burnt out. And so maybe you're burnt out today, or maybe you're burnt out this week, but maybe you're not completely burnt out of your job. So I'm just a big fan of can we be a little bit more specific when we're speaking about burnout, so we're not speaking inaccurately. But what I'm finding, and what a bulk of my research has been on for my dissertation, is a lot of burnout research that exists looks at demographic variables. So a person's gender, their ethnicity, where they work, their age, job experience. They look at a lot of factors that a person can't really change. They're called non-modifiable factors. So it's we look at a lot of things that a person can't really do anything about to determine if those things contribute to a person's level of burnout. And they do to some extent. But there's not a whole lot of research that I found that looks at the social aspect of burnout. How does different degrees of social support impact how a person experiences burnout? And that includes their administrative support, colleague support, and then the support they get from friends and family outside of their career or their job. And you're absolutely right. Administrative support plays a role into how a person experiences burnout. If you don't think you're getting a lot of positive support from your administration, you're more likely going to feel emotionally exhausted. You're going to have more of a negative affect. You're going to have a lower sense of achievement at your job. But people also have similar feelings about their relationships with their colleagues at work. So maybe you don't have the best administrators, but you have really great colleagues that you like working with. That might be enough of a buffer to overcome some of those issues. But then on the flip side, you might have great administrators who are helping you as best as they can. Your colleagues are pretty good. But then when you're outside of work, you don't necessarily have the support from your friends or your family to talk about your job or to vent about your job or anything like that. So I think all those types of relationships blend together that can contribute to how a person experiences burnout.
And I wonder if, because firefighters tend to consider that they have two families, the work family and the home family,
Sure.
but they also feel like they need to shield the home family from what goes on at work.
Absolutely.
So I wonder if even those that are married and have wonderful loving families and good relationships, I wonder if sometimes they don't have adequate social support simply because they don't open themselves up to it, or they feel like they can't.
Yeah. Well, and so I think that's also how you define like social support. So maybe it's not necessarily having family members that you can talk about your job with. Maybe you want to have relations with like family or personal relationships where you don't have to talk about work. You want to be able to compartmentalize and say like work is strictly for the station. Like, and when I'm home, I just want to be mom. I want to be dad. I want to be like boyfriend, girlfriend, whomever. Like, I just want to be in that role and not have to talk about work. But I want to know that when I'm leaving for like a 48-hour shift, that they're supportive of it, that they get it, that they understand that it's my job and I care about it. Versus if you're leaving for a 48-hour shift, are they like pushing back and having issues with you being on call constantly? Do they have an issue with you like missing holidays? Do they have an issue with you like having those different relationships with your friends at work? Things like that. So that's how I define social support from like friends and family. Like, do they just support the career that you have? Because that can be really detrimental, because if they don't, then that's going to add stress every time you go to work, because you know that they don't get it.
Well, I see on your bio that you're hoping to broaden your research to different populations, including first responders.
Love to.
Okay, so you haven't yet started to form research questions or anything like that?
No. So I think I'm in the final stages of writing up my results and everything. And I would love to have the opportunity to do similar research projects that I've just finished doing with like first responders, to see if some of those themes with like social support are in fact like I don't want to say an issue, but if they do contribute to some of the experience of burnout that first responders and firefighters might have.
Happy to collaborate.
That'd be fun.
It would be fun. You know, and actually we should probably just back up and define, because again, people say that they're burned out, but is there an actual definition for burnout, an accepted scientific definition?
Yeah. So I don't have my notes in front of me, but basically burnout is considered like a workplace phenomenon, meaning it's truly experience based. It's like a heightened level of stress that people would experience, like caused by workplace related stress. So theoretically, if you don't necessarily have a job, it would be
technically hard. Let's see.
It'd be hard, like, or like I would say like if you don't have a profession or something that you're spending a lot of time doing that like in some way, shape, or form like probably pays you money in some way. Again, I don't want to make this like broad of a claim, but I would say like yeah, it's like a workplace related stress phenomenon, workplace related stress. So you would think take away the job, burnout should go away. You still might have stress for other reasons, but the burnout specific should go away. And that's true for some people, that sometimes they just need to change their job and a lot of that stress goes away, or they keep the same job, but they do it in a different environment. Like we were talking about earlier, like some athletes or some firefighters like don't thrive in certain stations and they're really struggling. And then they move to a different station and it's like everything changed. And maybe it's because the team dynamics just are so much better for them.
You know, it almost seems like if someone is, we're back to firefighters now, if someone is on the struggle bus and the words are coming out of people's mouth, like maybe this isn't the job for you, maybe it's not for everybody, like it almost should be mandatory to reassign them to different station, different shift, whatever, just to make sure it isn't that, wouldn't you think?
I think that's something that like fire departments could strive to do, but I would wonder if like theoretically that makes a lot of sense. Like if a person's not thriving well in a station, obviously what might be some of the contributing factors, like even down here in Georgia, So I know there are firefighters that live in the area that I live in, and they commute like almost 45 minutes to an hour away to the stations they work at. And because there weren't any spots open in closer stations.
Got
So,
it.
and having grown up in New York City, I also knew that that was a thing in New York City where, like, you know, you might live in Queens, but you work in a fire station in Staten Island, or like so you just have to go where the spots are open sometimes. And that could be a contributing factor why people are like stressed at work. It's not necessarily like they dislike the station or anything, but their commute time to get to work is really bad. Or it's like it takes away that time away from their family, or they have to sit in traffic for like an hour and a half to like get to work and get home. It can be really tough. So I'm sure stations probably do try their best to match people up where they can go, but I'm sure in practical sense it would be really hard to guarantee that for everybody, because you need to, I would wonder if stations try their best, but I don't know if it's like as practical of a thing, as easy as a thing to do in reality.
As someone who presented at a conference in Staten Island and I wanted to go to Manhattan, and I looked at like I'd have to take the ferry and then however many buses, I was just like,
So
no,
much.
I'm not doing
It's so
it.
much. Yeah. Yeah, it's tough.
So I can imagine if that was my job, that would kind of suck. Okay.
Hmm.
All right. So I've been trying to think of a logical way to tie this question in, and I just don't think I can. So I think
Okay.
I'm just going to ask you and tell you it's unrelated, but it's such a darn good story. You have to tell it again.
Okay.
Your collegiate soccer experience.
Yeah.
I want to hear about it again.
Okay. So I grew up playing soccer, and I loved soccer, and I went to college with the intent to play soccer. And I think, not anything, I definitely went into college, my college soccer team with, I don't think they were unrealistic expectations, but I went in with expectations that the team I played for would like, they'd be like my best friends for life. These would be like my second set of sisters. They like, we'd hit it off, no problem. It'd be like, you like soccer, I like soccer, cool, besties for life, easy peasy. And then I get there, and probably this is where like I learned I'm probably more socially awkward than I knew at the time. But I'm like, hey, I'm Jenna, I'm here to play soccer. And the seasoned players were like, well, you have to try out. Oh, right. Yeah. Well, but you know, we're all on the team. They're like, well, not until you make it through tryouts. And I was like, oh, okay, got it. No problem. And I'm a competitive person by nature. I like racing and competing, and like have short person syndrome. So I'm always in the mood to like prove myself to other people. And I felt like I was putting myself through like the gamut of everything. I was like showing up to all the practices. I was running all the drills. I was participating in like um, all the scrimmages we were doing. I wasn't necessarily like the best at everything, but I was showing that I was trying really hard. And I didn't really care if I was the best on the team necessarily. Like I wanted to show that I was a good athlete, but I really just wanted to make like friends, because all of my friends from high school were soccer players, and it was such a big part of my life. But I just didn't feel like I was clicking or gelling with anybody on the team. And I just got this vibe of like, they're not going to like bring me into the team unless I make the team. And I'm being torn between like needing to prove myself, but like I'm wearing myself out for them, and I'm really trying to show up the best that I can, but I'm just not feeling like I'm getting any form of like encouragement or notice by them. Like maybe a little bit here and there from the coach, but just not a lot from the players. And I just felt like, all right, I don't feel like I'm not getting like the sense that the team wants me on the team. So why should I push myself to be on the team? So I just remember going up to the coach and saying like, I just quit. Like, I don't want to do it anymore. And I hated myself for a little bit admitting that I quit, because I really didn't quit things at that time in my life. And she even asked if I was sure that I wanted to quit. And I was like a little bit more than halfway through the tryout period. And I was like, yeah, I just don't feel like I'm like making it with the team right now. It's just not feeling like a good like connection, and it's not going well. Um, And I just remember her saying something along the lines of like, well, are you sure you don't want to play for the team? And at the time, I was just like, yeah, I don't. And now that I'm older, I've developed this mentality of, I think that was the issue. It's because I didn't want to play for anybody. I wanted to play with a team. And so whenever I'm like considering joining like other sports teams, or when I am working like for different teams at work, that's always the mentality I try to establish, is we're working with each other. We're not working for anything. And I think a lot of people so many people probably have stories like this where they didn't know what was wrong with the team that they were on. But the moment I used the language of, were you working for the team or were you working with the team? I think so many people are like, yeah, that. I was working for the team and it was not fun. I'm like, no, it's probably not. And so, yeah, quit soccer and then ended up joining the rugby team where they were just so much more open. And they even called me out. They're like, you're a little awkward. You're a little goofy. They're like, just chill out a little bit. I'm like, okay. But they like accepted my weirdness a little bit more readily. And after a little bit, like I definitely felt like I was playing with that team, and it was the best decision I made. Long story. Sorry.
No, every time I've heard the story 3 times now, because you told it at the summit and then you told it when we recorded and the recording was messed up.
Oh, that's right.
And you told it now. And it gives me the chills every time, because that's it. Do you want to play, or do you want to work for a department, or do you want to work with a shift, with a station, with a whatever? It's with.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. And I think that's a mentality, like I told you earlier in our talk, like when I'm in like an evaluator or a cadre role, I have that. I try to maintain that mentality, even though like I'm evaluating you, I'm working with you to help you get to the next stage in this like school or this performance. Like I want to work with you. So I definitely try to share, like make sure there's this like shared effort with the other individual. But that also means like, I'm going to put in effort to help you. You also have to show that you're putting in effort to help yourself get through. And I'm going to uphold the standards and push you. And you have to, and just keep pushing yourself. And I'm going to help you get through it too. So I definitely try to maintain that mentality as best as I can. Again, I don't think I'm ever perfect at it, but that's probably like one of the biggest things I always try to teach when I work with like a unit or a team or anything is, what type of dynamics are you setting? Do you want people to play for the team, or do you want people to play with the team? And more often than not, people will say with. And then once we're all in agreement there, then it's like going back to square one. Okay, what does it look like when we're playing with the team? What are the qualities? What are the standards that we create so that people know they're playing with the team? And then they build that themselves.
I'm going to say it one more time. You want to work with the team, not for the team. So good. Jenna, I want to talk to you about your dogs. Can we talk about your dogs?
Let's do that.
Let's hear about them, because you have a newer family member, right?
Yeah, we have 2 new dogs right now. So we've been a 3-dog home for a few years, but this year, 2024, was a great year of dogs for us recently, but earlier in the year it was a pretty rough year. So we lost. I had a corgi named Oz since 2015, and we lost him unexpectedly in March. So he was about 9 when we lost him. And we had always planned on getting another corgi, and we had just taken a while to fill that spot in our home. But then in late August, early September, we also lost our German Shepherd, Monty. He had hip dysplasia, and we saw that he was struggling with it for several months, and we just made the decision that, we didn't want him suffering any longer. So we lost Monty early this fall, late summer. And my husband and I, we had our 3rd dog, Daria. She's like a Rottweiler mix. She's a princess, can't do anything wrong. We named her Daria after the 1990s cartoon. I don't know if you remember. It was on MTV back in the day.
No.
It was, I think if you were like a super emo teenager in like the 90s, you would remember Daria. But basically, it starred the comedian Janine Garofalo. And she did the voice of like this moody emo teenager who just listened to music in her room with her best friend the whole time. So that's why she's named Daria, because when we first rescued her, she just wanted to stay upstairs in the bedroom the whole time. And it suits her. But in late September, we weren't really we knew we wanted to rescue another dog, but we just couldn't find the right one. And then we saw a profile for our dog, Ralphie, right now. He was a puppy, and he has one eye. He was born with one eye. He's some type of like hound mix, and he just looks so sad. And the rescue that we got him from originally named him Scallywag, and I was like, well, he's not a scallywag, and we gotta get him. And luckily, my husband's office is close to where the rescue is, and I said, hey, like, just go check him out. Just go look at him, see if you feel a vibe, because if you like him, I'll love him. But you know, just check him out. We don't have to make a decision today. And my husband's sneaky, because he's like, yeah, I'll check him out. And while he was driving home, the person from the rescue like texted me, and she said, oh, by the way, your husband like forgot to like take some paperwork, so I'll email it to you. I'm like, what paperwork? She's like, oh, when he got Scallywag, he rescued him today. I'm like, what? He was just supposed to check him out. So he comes home with, at the time, Scallywag, and then we were like, we're not keeping that name. So he's now named Ralphie after A Christmas Story, because he'll shoot your eye out, and he's only got one eye. But he is the sweetest little cuddle bug, and just that dog just wants to be loved. And then a month later, we got our new corgi, whose name is Spock. We named him after the Star Trek character, because he's all ears and has really pronounced eyebrows. And he's so adorable. He runs this house, and he's 15 pounds of just piss and vinegar. He's just so funny.
There's got to be something with Jenna and corgis, because my guest a couple weeks ago, Jenna Yentis from Texas A&M, has 2 corgis.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, Jenna. I think they're just such great dogs. I think they're like my kindred spirit, because they're short, but they're like secretly like athletic and agile, and they're usually like very confident and outspoken little dogs, because they're a small dog with a big personality. I'm like, oh, that's me. And so I just immediately feel super drawn to corgis, and they're just so fun, because it's like they like to be outside, but not too much. I'm like, that's great. That's me too. They like to be active, but they're not crazy. I'm like, that's me too. They love to snack, and I'm like, that's me too. Love it.
Okay. I think that's a great fit. You were going to have to send me an updated photo of the dog family.
I'll have to text you some photos of everybody. Oh
my gosh, that's amazing. Well, I have enjoyed this conversation so much. I appreciate your time so much. Is there any parting wisdom words, anything that you want to leave the listeners with, or should we drop the mic? It's up to you.
I feel like now there's pressure to like say something philosophical and like thought-provoking. I would just say, ending with words that we almost started on, is like, just do the things that set your soul on fire. Do the things that set your soul on fire. And yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to reword it just a little bit, because my friend Shantae says this all the time, and you're going to love this. Be relentless in the pursuit of things that set your soul on fire.
I love that.
Isn't that so good?
Yeah. Way to go, Shantae. That is great.
Way to go, Shantae.
I love it. On Shantae.
All right. Well, this has been AZ and Just Say Jenna. And we are officially out. Thanks, Jenna.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.